Hey guys, it's Adrian for ProductionCrate.com, and holy crud, are you guys ready for a zombie tutorial? I hope so, because that's what we're doing today. I intentionally chose a background clip that had some movement in it so that we could motion track it, because this tutorial otherwise wouldn't have that much content in it. But what I neglected to consider is that motion tracking is super basic and boring. So great job, Adrian. But we're just doing a quick 3D camera track, and immediately before we even let it go through the footage, we're going to tore down the advanced and just give it a hint, tell it that this is going to be a tripod pan. There is no perspective in this shot. It's just a tripod spinning around. So we'll just let that do its thing. Okay, now the tracking has finished and the camera is solved, and we can really just click anywhere to make our 3D camera because there's not really any 3D data here. So just pick a spot and create a null in a camera. We actually don't even need that null, but we have it. Maybe we'll find a use for it. Spoiler alert, no we won't. So let's go over to Footage Crate and we will navigate to the extras, the zombies, and I think I want to pick a wide shot of a zombie that is walking around. So I will click onto that section, and these ones with the green backgrounds are the free ones. I'm going to go ahead and use one of those today. I'm just going to download this one. If you have a pro account though, you might want to check out these ones on the black backgrounds. They are pre-keyed for you and they are in 4K resolution, whereas these are in 1080p, which is still really good. So I'll bring that newly downloaded zombie into the composition, and I just want to show you that if we select the key light effect and drop it on, these free green screen clips are just one-click keys. So just click on the green and there you go. It's pretty well keyed out automatically. So now we can shrink that down and move it into place. I probably want it to be right around here. So we actually need to go ahead and make that a 3D layer, and it's going to jump a little bit because of our camera that we already have in the scene. So that's okay. Just move it into place. It doesn't really matter where it is in Z space. Really just worry about the X and Y. Get it to kind of where you want it. I'm going to flip it around. I don't even have to flip it. I can just spin it around and that'll work. Of course, I'm going to need to roto these trees out. That's not going to be too hard to do. I'll save that for the end. I just want to show you how to correct these colors first. So we can add a levels effect. You can do this with a curves effect as well, but I find the levels is a little bit easier to control, but really that's just personal preference. I'm going to drop the levels effect on there, and using these controls down here, these show channel and color management settings button, I can change it to just see one color channel at a time, which is going to make this color correction super easy. So I'm just going to look at the red channel, and I'm going to change the levels to also only affect the red channel. I'm going to zoom out so I can see what I'm doing, and if I move this triangle here, that's my input black. As you can see, the zombie is way darker than the rest of the scene, and that's no good. So really moving these upward triangles around isn't going to help much. The black level still stays put. So we want to move our input black. So let's just bring that up a little bit until it starts to blend, and then use these arrows on the upper portion of the histogram to just tweak it. And when you have that looking pretty good, you can move on to the green channel and do the same thing. We're just going to bring our input black up a little bit and tweak to taste. That looks pretty well blended to me. And for our blue channel, it's going to need a lot more correction, but that doesn't mean that it's more difficult or anything like that. And that looks like it might be good. And then once you go back into your full color, you can tweak a little bit further from there. It looks like I altered the blue a little bit too much. The blue usually is the trickiest channel. I don't really know why. Our edges aren't quite blending as nicely as I'd like them to, so a very simple trick for that is we can just duplicate this zombie, turn off the top one that we just made. On the bottom one, we can go ahead and change that to a darken transfer mode, and then on this top one, turn it back on, and I'll add an effect to it called Simple Choker. And if I solo it, you can see what we're doing. This will just kind of bring in the edges, and we just want to bring them in a little bit, and there you go. So now you have your edges blending in in a little bit better. One other thing that we probably want to do is you'll notice that our zombie is looking a lot crisper than the actual background. So we might want to blur it out a little bit. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add a fast box blur, and 1 pixel I know already is going to be too much. So maybe 0.3, even 0.2. For some reason this box blur seems to be a lot stronger than I always expect it to be. Actually, I'm just going to go with a 0.1, and I think that is the value for us. So I'm just going to copy that and put it onto my other zombie clip, and there we go. That zombie looks pretty well composited to me. Last thing to do is maybe add a new solid. I want to make it a red solid so it's very visible, and we don't want it to be the size of the comp. We want it to be much bigger. So I'm just going to make it much bigger than the comp, and then if we make that into a 3D layer, it's not as big as I expected, but it'll be all right. Just make it into a 3D layer and bring it in right over where our zombie is. And now we can just shut off all our layers except for the background, and make sure you're still on the red solid, and we can just start tracing around the shape of some of these foreground trees. I want to get some of these leaves. So if we turn that red solid back on, here's something we can do. Make a duplicate of your 3D camera, make a duplicate of your background footage. Tell your background footage duplicate to use your red solid as an alpha matte. Go ahead and grab that new camera, the footage, and the red solid, and pre-compose them. We'll just call this foreground, and I'll solo it so you can see what's going on here. If you apply this effect to it called Refine Soft Matte, just drop that on. Basically, if you make kind of a crappy roto, this effect will look at it and say, nah bro, I know what you meant, and it'll fix it for you. Right now it's doing a little bit too much fixing. First of all, we don't want to decontaminate the edge colors because the edge colors need to stay the same as what they already were. Get rid of that, that already looks better. And now we can just turn down the additional edge radius. We just want a little bit of correction here, not a whole lot. All right, and that should look a lot better when the zombie starts to cross behind it. That looks a little more realistic than our silly straight mask lines did. I didn't really mean for this to come out looking like Bigfoot, but that's what happened, and I guess that's just the reality we live in now. So there's one other thing I want to show you how to do, which is called a light wrap, but it doesn't really make sense with this clip because there's not a lot of light coming from behind the character. So I'm going to move on to a second example. So this one, I just have a still image of a graveyard, and let's go to the site, and I'm just going to grab a different zombie. Maybe this one right here, just download it. Okay, bring that into the composition. Again, it's a one-click key. Okay, so let's move that zombie into position, and we can color correct it with the levels real quick. Just gonna speed through it because you already know how to do it. Well, first I'm going to pre-compose the zombie. Control-Shift-C, I always call it zombie. I'm going to duplicate the background, maybe pre-compose that as well. And now on this background layer, which I have soloed right now, I'm going to add a set matte effect, and I'm going to tell it to take the matte from the zombie, but it's doing the opposite of what I want. I want to invert that matte. And now I can bring my zombie layer below it, and this might be a little confusing, but I've punched a hole in the background shaped like the zombie, and now I'm filling that hole up with the zombie. But now on this background, I can apply a blur. I'll use that fast box blur again because that's just the blur we're supposed to be using now. And I can bring that blur up. And then I can also, if I need to, add a levels effect to it. And if I set it to alter the alpha channel, then I can bring back in some of that transparency. But that's looking a little extreme. I don't really need to do that. And the idea here is that I'm trying to make the colors bleed from the background a little bit onto this zombie. So I'm actually going to hit this button right here, the preserve the underlying transparency button. It's just marked with this T. If I hit that, now the background layer can only show where there's stuff below it. So now I can really see what I'm doing. I'm just kind of changing the edge of this zombie a little bit, which is going to make him blend in. We can't really show you what that looks like right now because if I turn this back on, now there's stuff there. So it's going to make our blurry part show up. So we're going to have to pre-compose that. But first, I want to change the transfer mode of this background that I have all blurred out to a lighten transfer mode. So it can only make the zombie lighter. It can't make it darker. Now, a lot of people tend to use the screen transfer mode. So I figure I should just let you know, most tutorials you're going to see tell you to use screen transfer mode. I disagree. I like to use the lighten one, but you can use the screen if you want to, if you disagree with me. It actually looks kind of good, but I'm just going to go with the lighten. And then I'm also, you don't really really want the light wrapping around the feet here and messing up your shadow and stuff. So I am just going to add a mask, and I'll invert that mask and I will feather that mask out. And also this light wrap is more extreme than it probably should be, really just for demonstrational purposes, but I can turn it down. And then if I select the zombie in the background and Control-Shift-C, pre-compose them and lay them back over our original background, you can see the zombie is kind of sitting in that background a little bit better because the colors from the background are wrapping around him, a light wrap. And that's how you do that. Those of you that use HitFilm for your compositing are actually in luck, because everything I've showed you how to do in this tutorial is actually easier in HitFilm. First of all, as far as the light wrap, there's a preset built into HitFilm called light wrap. So you just drag that onto your zombie clip, twirl open the properties and select the background for the source layer, and there you go. You've got a ready done light wrap. You can change your radius and the opacity, and you can change the blend mode, which they default to lighten. You know, I like that, but feel free to experiment. And then also, as far as color grading, in HitFilm Pro or in Express, if you have the color grading add-on pack, there's an effect called grading transfer. And if you just drop that onto your footage of the zombie that is, and you can select your background as the source, and let's move that above the light wrap so that light wrap is not being affected by it. And it just takes colors from your background and puts them where I think it should go on your foreground, and that's a great way to make your composites match. If it's a little bit strong, you can just turn it down a little bit, and as you can see, that's very quick and easy. Unfortunately, that effect is not available in the Express version without the add-on, but the light wrap preset is. And I think we're going to have to call it a day on this tutorial. That is the basics on how you composite these zombie effects. It's really easy because they're pretty much good to go on their own. You really should just remember to always color correct your stock footage when you composite it into your other footage. That's supposed to be the main takeaway from this tutorial. So that trick with the levels, you should be using that on pretty much everything that you composite in. So I'll go ahead and end on that note. My name has been Adrian Jensen and will continue to be for years to come. Make sure to check back very soon for a more exciting zombie related effect. Goodbye.